This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You are tuned to The Baseline. Kyle Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. 'Tis the season. We bring tidings and cheers, and the NBA is giving you a front row seat to some awesome basketball being played. And you know we are right there in the heart of it, ready to discuss it and break it down and talk about all of the good stuff that's been happening over the last week or so. Feels like forever. Because I have not had an opportunity to talk with this man, this dude who's been globetrotting around the Caribbean islands, searching for the perfect spot to communicate to the basketball world his breadth of knowledge. And that's my right-hand man, 50 grand NBA aficionado, Don Mad contributor, writer for one of the illest websites, www.shawsports.net, the big kahuna at my PNC, Mr. Warren Shaw, a.k.a. the smooth Saint Nick. What's going on, man? Welcome back.
Well, I appreciate the welcome back and everything like that. And yeah, we had a great time, taking a little time during the NBA season to go and check out the Caribbean a little bit, see what basketball life was over there. I had a great chance to actually see Carmelo Anthony's court in Puerto Rico during my trip, which was kind of unexpected. I kind of just ran into it, but nevertheless, it's great to be back and you're talking NBA basketball. So first of all, salute, and a happy ho, Merry Christmas to all our fans and listeners of the NBA Baseline, brother.
I know, right? And you don't even have a machine gun, right? Like our man Bruce Willis does that. Hold up a second, Shaw. I gotta fall back a minute. So how did you just stumble upon, or tripped yourself upon Carmelo's basketball court? I would think that Carmelo's basketball court in PR would be almost like a landmark out there, because it's got to stick out like a sore thumb, man. So don't tell me you just stumbled across it. I mean, come on, you had your little basketball GPS tracker going on. You were looking for that court.
Well, maybe my subconscious was, and to be honest, we were just kind of walking along the coastline, actually checking out some of the forts that Puerto Rico is known for. And lo and behold, I remember when Carmelo had that court dedicated to himself, about a couple of years ago, and they made a big deal about it. And it's really kind of, in one of the poorer parts of Puerto Rico. So it's a good spot for it. And again, it's really on the coastline. So the beach is overlooking the court and everything. And we were just kind of walking along the coastline. And I really did not even remember that it was there. I wasn't even thinking about it. And then lo and behold, as we're walking, I was like, wait a minute. I saw the big Nike symbol, the big Carmelo Anthony, took some pics, posted them on Instagram, and it was a great time. My lady did me a solid by taking the picture of me way of, giving me the nice aerial shot. So everybody check that out on Instagram, man.
That's how we do, man. My man standing front and center. Right there in the heart of it, man. Awesome stuff. I think at some point, though, Shaw, we are going to allow you to truly embrace, the true spirit of Christmas, meaning, we got to get you around the white snow, the nice, cool, brisk air. It just ain't going to happen this year. Do you know that it's going to be 74 degrees on Christmas Eve up here, bro? Come now.
Bananas.
You know what I mean? Like seriously, Santa Claus is going to be rolling in a BMW, you know what I'm saying? Convertible, drop top down, you know what I'm saying? Breeze blowing all through the beard and everything. The reindeer is going to be kicking back. I mean, seriously, there is no reason for us to even have an inkling of snowflakes or anything like that. It's just absolutely nervous this winter. But you know what? It's all good because we've had some bad winters. So I'm all for a very calm, relaxing, and even somewhat warm, Christmas season this time of the year. But listen, we're here to warm things up. Before we even get to the NBA games, we've got a great show lined up for y'all. Clearly, the breadth and the topic of conversation is going to be about those Xmas games that is going to take place coming this Friday. So myself and Shaw, we're going to break those down, give you the nuances of what to look for and what's going to make it so exciting for NBA night, Christmas night. Also this week, we're going to be discussing the situation happening out in Chicago. Jimmy Butler making a little bit of noise, shaking up the foundation. Is he actually taking the bull by the horns? We'll discuss that in our segment of The Drop. We'll also talk talk about the NBA Hall of Fame inductees, some interesting points to make out, and an interesting conversation my man Shaw can't wait to dig his nails into. And of course, you got our coveted Coast to Coast, where we discuss all of the topics happening. We appreciate everyone once again for showing their love and support over and over, week after week, show after show here on The Baseline. You know how to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA, or get at me at GameFace Lee. And we always encourage you to get at the show's Twitter handle at NBA_The Baseline. Hashtag up The Baseline. Let us know who you are and what you're about. Available on all the major platforms, available on Microsoft TuneIn, available on Stitcher Radio, Player FM, and iTunes. So be sure to download any one of those platforms and allow us to be your go-to resource discussing all things in the NBA. Look, you know how we like to do. We cannot wait to get this show kick-started. So it's time to roll in with the breakdown.
Time to break it down to the bone gristle.
Time now for the breakdown. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, the Baseline NBA podcast. And our topic for this week here on the breakdown is clearly about the games that will be taking place on Christmas. The NBA has lined up some really interesting matchups for us to watch all throughout the day. Starting at noon, the New Orleans Pelicans will travel to Miami to take on Dwayne Wade's Miami Heat. Right after that, we'll see the Chicago Bulls rolling into OKC to take on Russell Westbrook and the Durantula and the Oklahoma City Thunder. Then we'll follow that up with the Cleveland Cavaliers taking on the Warriors. That's expected to be the premier matchup. And then later on, we've got the battle in the Lone Star State between the San Antonio Spurs and the Houston Rockets. And then the Los Angeles Clippers and the Los Angeles Lakers do battle, to see who owns LA. And, Shaw, at some particular point when we looked at these matchups at the beginning of the year or in the offseason when the schedules had rolled out, we said to ourselves, this is going to be some really good basketball. And somehow some of this has slightly changed, because I don't know if it's necessarily going to be about good basketball as much as it's going to be about whether it's going to be entertaining basketball. Because some of the matchups, you can tell, while some of the teams may have looked really good at the beginning of the season, their struggles and inconsistencies have really had us kind of scratching our heads about whether or not these guys are really going to show up and bring us some quality basketball to watch on Christmas Day.
It's, I think that's a great point. It's very, very frustrating to have looked at the schedule to begin the year and now to realize some of these matchups are not going to be what you've hoped up. I think the only thing to begin the season you thought was a little sketchy was probably going to be that Clippers and Lakers game, because the Lakers weren't going to be a very competitive team, but with the rumors and potential of it being Kobe's last year, before him announcing the retirement, that seemed to make it, what the NBA wanted to do and make it why it was one of the last games on Christmas Day. But the Pelicans and the Rockets are probably the two most disappointing teams on this Christmas Day schedule. Both were expected to be a lot better than they were. The Rockets are playing good enough basketball to be competitive, I think, in a game versus San Antonio, but they're just not what you would have expected them to be. But the downside is really watching this terrible, terrible New Orleans team in the opening game, if you will, against Miami. But they've been playing a little bit better lately. Hopefully they'll make that competitive. I was even thinking about going to that game here on Christmas Day here in Miami myself, but Pelicans just haven't lived up to expectations.
Yeah, and let's go back 1 second, Shaw, with regards to the Rockets and the Spurs. And, we've talked about this with regards to this Rockets team. We've seen, a lot of the things that were being speculated, especially at the time where you were on vacay with Dwight Howard and his, him not being happy playing, playing Robin, to Harden as Batman, as being Harden's Batman. And it's just, to me, it's disturbing, because right now this team does not have a real identity any longer. There's just way too many question marks about this team. And I'm just confining it within the scope of they're playing the second best team, arguably, in the NBA, or you can say the second best team in the Western Conference, which at one point last year, the Rockets themselves were the second best team in the Western Conference. And I'm just wondering how, on this particular stage, Shaw, because this is like a premiere night. It's like, NFL, when you make it on Monday Night Football. To me, this is like Monday Night Football for the NBA. And if you're the Houston Rockets, you're James Harden, already having the kind of season that you're having. Is he going to bring it? Because we've seen when James Harden can actually be a one-man wrecking crew and make good teams really look bad. But I know that with this Rockets team, it's not even the same Rockets team that he had last year, and he does practically have the same players minus a Josh Smith. Remember, they didn't get Josh Smith until somewhere close to the trade deadline. It was after Christmas. So my whole thing is, what kind of James Harden are we seeing? Because there are times where James Harden, he looks like he wants to be that guy, and then there are moments where, James Harden just seems absolutely disinterested, like he already wants this season to end because he has no confidence in the team that he plays around.
Well, I would agree with that. He's had an uneven season. Again, he's looked very much like his old self from last year, if you will, MVP-like in some stretches. But the offense and the defense has been dramatically different, and especially with the new coach now in place, and whether you say what you want about McHale, the rotations are not exactly the same. They're having a very hard time figuring out who's going to play alongside Harden, especially in that 3 and 4 spot. The Terrence Jones has started, Montezumas has come back. He started a little bit. Capella has started a little bit. And then Dwight Howard to begin the year was in and out of lineup, not playing back-to-back. So they really lack a lot of consistency in that roster, which is kind of reminiscent of what they had last year. But it just seems like their defense is really taking a step back. And Harden just doesn't seem to have the same interest that he did in playing defense last year. You're seeing a lot of those, memes, if you will, and him getting turned around or not even being in the same space as his man on the defense side of the basketball. And offensively, he started off the year shooting way too many threes. And again, he's a good three-point shooter, but he's not a prolific, amazing three-point shooter. When he needs to be taking, second. I think he was second in the league in terms of attempts at one point in the year. That's just not his game. He needs to be driving and doing his, his little shake, if you will, and Euro step to the basket and creating contact. So if he continues to do that, I think the Rockets will get better as we've seen them play pretty well in stretches, especially with Howard getting more involved in the offense. And I think Bickerstaff just came out and said that again as recently too, that they need Howard more involved, but they don't seem to have the same chemistry and camaraderie that they did last year. And I think a lot of that has to do with McHale being gone.
You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. It's our segment of the breakdown as we discuss the 5 premier games that will be taking place on December the 25th. One of the games, Shaw, and we're going to get to the marquee game, because, I think to the credit of people who want to see the rematch between the Cavaliers and the Warriors, it's so weird because you look at what this Warriors team has done up to this point, and we can, I guess you can say, make the argument that the Cleveland Cavaliers, without Kyrie Irving, have not looked like the team I think we all were hoping. And here's an interesting thing that I actually want to throw out there, Shaw. If the Cleveland Cavaliers had Kyrie Irving, had Iman Shumpert, and had these guys at full strength, do you think that they would have been able to equate what the Golden State Warriors were able to accomplish the first quarter of this season? Do you think that team's potential and what they bring to the table, they could have equated what the Warriors were able to do at the beginning of this season?
I mean, it's hard to say. I think Golden State was in a very special zone, had a lot of things that were riding in their direction in terms of having that chip on their shoulder, wanting to prove to people that they weren't a fluke. And some people said the schedule was favorable to them. I don't necessarily buy into that. I think they played some very, very tough opponents to begin the year, especially being in the Western Conference, just that the Western Conference hasn't lived up to the same expectations as we would expect it to begin the season. But to answer the question directly, I don't think Cleveland would have been on the same type of run, even if they were healthy. They're just a different dynamic that the Cavs have about them, even trying to get rest and things like that too. I just don't think that they would have played their guys as long and would have been able to get off to the same 24, 25 straight wins that the Golden State Warriors did.
Yeah, the Cleveland Cavaliers are coming in right now with right now off of a 5-game winning streak. We don't know whether or not that's going to hold. That's going to hold as we get closer, to Friday night's matchup. But one of the things that I do find interesting, Shaw, is that if the Cleveland Cavaliers go on the road and they beat the Golden State Warriors, what will this say about the Cleveland Cavaliers more so than it will about the Golden State Warriors?
Well, I think it's because you'll see Cleveland healthy. So everyone will start to say, well, what could have been if they would have played them completely healthy in the NBA Finals? And that's he said, she said. We don't know if that's really the case. It's a different year, it's a different dynamic, so we can't put too much water into that. But it definitely is a statement game, and I think Cleveland has something to prove. And if they can go in there again with Kyrie coming back, having a couple games under his belt, Kevin Love settled in his role, also back from injury from a season ago. Shumpert is back as well. This is a team that has the tools to beat and compete with anybody, including the Golden State Warriors. So if they go up there and beat them on Christmas Day, a lot's going to be made about that. But it's still a long way to go before we get to June.
Now, we're not completely sure whether or not Harrison Barnes is going to be available to play in this particular game, but we've seen the depth of this Golden State Warriors team at work already with the record that they've obviously presented. And, Shaw, it's interesting because I was just talking with someone earlier today regarding, the hype behind what the Warriors were able to accomplish and if whether or not they're capable of eclipsing the 95, 96 Bulls and the 72 wins that were amassed. And one of the things that I think keeps getting missed about what makes this Warriors team so dangerous, what makes this Warriors team so formidable right now that I don't think is being spoken about when you look at the dynamics between those teams and this team, is one of the things that makes this Warriors team so dangerous is that they basically have 4, possibly even 5 ball handlers on the basketball court at any given moment, any given time, which is even if the Chicago Bulls have 3 elite defenders in a Scottie Pippen, a Michael Jordan, and a Horace Grant or a Dennis Rodman, whatever, they still have to account for any one of the Warriors' front court, back court players with the ability to open up and start on a break their transition game. Usually, you can rely on the fact that they need to get the ball to their ball handlers. The Chicago Bulls never had 4 legitimate ball handlers on their team, not in any Phil Jackson system. So what I'm saying is that this Warriors team is so versatile that I'm not saying that they would beat out that Bulls team in a 7-game series, but that's what makes this team so dangerous is that they pretty much abolished the perception of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 positional numbers as much as it is what their skill set brings to the table that can bring those mismatches. And to me, it's that very dynamic that I think continues to be overlooked about why this team, even if the Cleveland Cavaliers were at full strength, it's why sometimes we look at this and say, maybe the Warriors were really just that good and they found their zone at the right time to capture the championship.
Yeah, there's no way that I'm going to take anything away from what Golden State's been able to accomplish, and healthy Cleveland or not, the Warriors are the defending champions and they deserve everything that they've gotten thus far. And like you said, with that 5 guys being able to shoot, pass, and even handle the ball, if you will, that makes them an impossible matchup. Again, I think I said it earlier, was on a call with ESPN and they were talking about the Christmas Day games, and Jalen Rose actually said the guy he would most try to stop on Golden State isn't necessarily Stephen Curry. He would try to stop Draymond Green, because Green is whatever he was, 5th or 6th in the league in assists, at the time of one of our shows, and he's somebody who you really need to kind of take out of their offense because he's making everything work for them. A la kind of what David Lee was doing for them a few years ago before Green came in and took that job from him, if you will. Take out Draymond Green and his ability to even pass and get others involved, and you then make Stephen Curry more of a playmaker, which he can do. But Curry is not one of those guys who's going to get 10, 12 assists a game. He really has those types of performances. He's in that 6 or 7 range, and gets his 20 plus points. So I thought that was an interesting strategy by what Jalen Rose had thought, and I don't know if that's just something that would work because they have so many guys that can beat you, but like I said, that's just what it is. They have so many guys that can beat you. So stopping one guy doesn't mean that you're going to get the W.
Yeah, and the other thing as well, too, is that I understand that, the NBA played in a different era. The Bulls, played in a different era of basketball where it was much more physical. But I think we're slighting teams like the Golden State Warriors, like the teams that LeBron James have played against, played with, where they wouldn't be capable of being as physical. I mean, let's keep in mind that even in this day and age, with the way that physical training and conditioning is given, some of these guys can basically not just handle the punishment, but dish out the punishment if absolutely necessary. And I think if the rules were changed back to the old school ways, some of these guys would have a much more different mentality about how they go about scoring the basketball. That herein lies the basketball IQ point that I was making, with regards to this Warriors team, and we're giving credit where credit is due. To me, this Warriors team is just very intelligent, and that bodes well for a lot of teams that are mentally just, they check themselves out, when they're not playing well, when they take themselves out of the zone. This team, time and time again, just when you think you have them, even when they were losing against the Milwaukee Bucks had a level of confidence and cockiness, and the Warriors just continued to stay the course. And eventually they found themselves within 3 points. And even though they lost that basketball game because it was a matter of fatigue, not a matter of execution, mental fatigue. To me, I look at what this Bucks team could have done to capitalize off of a win like that. They've gotten nowhere within. You look at this Warriors team, and they're clearly a team, again, they understand the focus. They understand the task at hand. If they won it, it would just be something to add to the record books, but it's still not the championship. And they clearly have their eyes set on being the best prepared, perfectly executed basketball team going into the NBA Finals, something that the other 29 teams in the NBA right now don't really have a clue or understand how to prepare for, maybe the exception of the Cleveland Cavaliers.
I mean, they are the NBA nightmare. Nobody wants to play this team. Nobody wants to match up with them because, as you said, there's just so many ways that they can beat you. And Cleveland is the quote unquote the only hope right now. I mean, obviously San Antonio is right there as well in the Western Conference, but when it comes to what we were talking about previously, especially talking about the NBA Finals matchup, this Christmas Day matchup is really going to be the creme de la creme, if you will. Can't wait to see how LeBron, Kyrie, and Kevin Love, how they come fired up against the Golden State Warriors on Christmas Day.
Definitely, man. You're tuned to the Baseline. Kyle Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Our segment of the breakdown as we're basically giving you the nuances, things to look for with regards to the 5 games that are going to be played on Christmas. Shaw, the final matchup, and I think that this is going to actually be the best matchup. We've talked about the marquee matchup because on the billboards, it's the finals rematch between the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Warriors, but I really honestly believe that the marquee matchup is going to be the Chicago Bulls against the Oklahoma City Thunder. And the only reason why I'm saying that, and we'll talk a little bit about the Jimmy Butler situation in Chicago, but the reason why I say that is because when you look at this dynamic between the Chicago Bulls and the Oklahoma City Thunder, these are two teams right now that are at a crossroads. You have one team with two superstar players who may or may not be playing with each other, given that everyone says that they are probably the best chance in the Western Conference to knock off the Golden State Warriors. And then you have a team in Chicago who have had this window of opportunity with this fallen superstar, former MVP Derrick Rose, and this budding superstar of Jimmy Butler. And the dynamic and the chemistry between these guys, clearly it is not the future of the Chicago Bulls. And yet these two teams are on a collision course where they have successful records, they have great surrounding pieces and depth, and now they're going to basically be playing against each other. I just really like the pieces, the matchup, and the storylines that are building up for this particular game, which will happen at 2:30 in the afternoon.
Yeah, it's a very underrated game in my opinion as well. I think it's going to be one of the better ones of the day. Jimmy Butler is an intense dude. I mean, the more you watch this guy, you realize how much how much of a chip on his shoulder he has, and I think he's going to be right out there, trying to give it to KD and Russ as best he can. And there's a lot of things going on now. Joakim Noah is now going to be out for that game, sidelined with a shoulder injury. So that's going to hurt their depth in their front court. But Gasol, and now they're playing Bobby Portis, and obviously with Taj Gibson as well. They can match up pretty formidably with OKC, but it's really going to come down to the superstars there and how Rose handles Westbrook, if he handles Westbrook at all, and then what KD does with Jimmy Butler, and kind of vice versa. Great matchup to watch. I hope everyone's tuned into that one.
Yeah, definitely. So I got to ask you this question. Who's the X factor for this Chicago Bulls team to pull out this kind of victory? Remember, this is a Bulls team that is going to be on the road against OKC. Over this week, man, they've lost some really bad basketball games to the Brooklyn Nets. And I just think about how this team potentially really could be good, even if they lost Joakim Noah with Fred Hoiberg now as the new head coach. I thought that the idea and the premise is that this team is supposed to be more fluid offensively. And I just think that their most games, if Jimmy Butler if his game is on, this Bulls team would actually have a losing record. And that speaks volumes because they still have a former MVP player who I understand he's just trying to get over the mental hump that he can complete an NBA season now. But still, they still have really good players on that team. And yes, despite some of the injury bugs that have happened for some of the players, it still doesn't excuse the fact that this Bulls team should continue to improve offensively, which is part of the reason why they brought Fred Hoiberg there.
Yeah, I think the X factor is probably going to be Mirotic, especially with Noah out. We really can't be looking at Rose as the former MVP anymore. I mean, that's exactly what it is. It's former. He's not the current, and he's not going to be an MVP candidate anytime soon, if ever again. And that's just reality of that situation. So I think it's Mirotic who's really struggling with his shot during stretches of the season right now. And the rotation has changed. Gibson's in the starting lineup now, and as I mentioned, Noah's now also going to be out. So Mirotic has to step up and be that guy who can give them some consistent scoring, especially from the perimeter with his size as a stretch 3, stretch 4, if you will. I think he's the guy who's going to be the most important for them on this Christmas Day game.
Yeah, and Shaw, what about Doug McDermott? He's been getting some extra minutes now, especially off of some of the injuries. It's allowed Fred Hoiberg to really, stretch and use that rotation. Doug McDermott has really been coming on the scene. Do you expect him to play a pivotal role if the Chicago Bulls have any expectation to eke out this victory on the road?
Yeah, McDermott is someone who's supremely confident and someone that Hoiberg seems to like as well. Had a chance to talk to him a couple of weeks ago for an interview in Dime Magazine. And he really believes in his ability that he's more than just a three-point shooter. He's a guy who can play the all-around game and get to the rim as well and shoot the mid-range too a little bit too. So I think if he is on and he's going to get the minutes that Hoiberg is going to award him, if you will, McDermott is somebody who can definitely have an impact on this game and really make a big difference from all angles. But the key for him is really making sure that he's locked in defensively. Obviously, he's never going to be a lockdown defender, but he just needs to be able to stay with his man and contest some shots. And I think Hoiberg will accept that enough to keep him out there for the offensive side of things.
All right, man. 5 basketball games, all of them delectable items to basically tantalize the NBA eye come Christmas. The Pelicans taking on the Heat, Bulls taking on the Thunder, Cavaliers taking on the Warriors, Spurs taking on the Rockets, Clippers taking on the Lakers. It all happens starting noon on ESPN. Noon o'clock, yeah, right? New one.
That's a new Christmas day.
Hey, man, I'm telling you, I'm bringing in all of the new lingua. We bringing them out for 2016. But listen, it's going to be some awesome basketball. I'm sure a lot of people and millions of viewers are going to be spot on looking at Kobe Bryant for the last time on a Christmas game and stuff. And he may even try to bring his A game out that night. I'm probably going to be more fixated on just how good or how bad this Los Angeles Clippers team shows up on primetime television. I mean, we've seen the good and we've seen the ugly with this team way too many times already. So to me, it'll be interesting stuff. But Shaw, man, I cannot wait for these NBA games to take place. I think it's just going to be a great, great day of NBA basketball being played.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I'm sure the fans hope so as well. So make sure you're tuned in at noon o'clock, as my man said, and make sure you catch that Miami Heat and Pelicans game. But I think our pick of the week or pick of the day will probably be that Bulls and Thunder game. Obviously, Cleveland and Golden State is what everyone's going to be watching, but I'm really going to be interested in what's happening with Chicago and OKC myself.
Yeah, it's going to be some great stuff. You're tuned to The Baseline. Kyle Lee, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, and this was The Breakdown. Time now for the drop. Kyle Lee, Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast, and good stuff, Shaw. Man, we breaking down the Christmas games taking place, and it's interesting because while we are saying that the true marquee matchup will probably be that Chicago Bulls and Oklahoma City Thunder game, in the backdrop, in the locker room, the cooler talk a little bit, it's more about this Bulls team that makes the matchup so intriguing, but more importantly, it's about this the coming of age of Jimmy Butler. All right. And I'm not saying that, a guy doing what Jimmy Butler has done, which I'm sure people have seen either through Twitter or on, whatever's been projected on ESPN or NBA TV. But the fact that Jimmy Butler is calling out his coaching staff and almost in ways kind of calling out his team, that they need to be pushed harder. They need to play harder. I I know a lot of people are looking at that negatively. A lot of pro players are looking at that negatively because you're supposed to keep that in-house. I'm kind of curious on your perspective on this, Shaw, because my take from this might actually have plays twofold. One, in favor of Jimmy Butler, and two, in favor of the Chicago Bulls.
Well, it's a touchy situation, I think, for Chicago and this team. I think for the last few years we've seen everyone kind of walk on eggshells when it comes to Derrick Rose, and you've seen fans turn on him, and then there's the quote unquote Butler Rose feud going on, and now Butler's kind of taking that leadership role and saying this is his team, if you will, and that Hoiberg isn't doing a good enough job and coaching hard enough to get them to be in the position that the Bulls probably should be given their roster and talent. I just don't know that if he taking to the media with that type of statement was really what they needed at this time. But they're not necessarily in dire straits right now, and I feel like that could have probably been handled a little bit better. Take a situation a couple of weeks ago with DeMarcus Cousins, Rajon Rondo, and George Karl. It was one of those things where, hey, they didn't like the way things were going. They ended up saying, they said it was going to be a 10-minute meeting, ended up being a 2-hour meeting, talking to Karl after practice, and opened up a dialogue for them to kind of continue throughout the rest of the season. Yes, it's paid varying degrees of success to this point, but the Kings are a very, very vastly different team than Chicago Bulls. And I think Butler could have taken that approach with his rookie coach and Fred Hoiberg, and kind of just said, hey, listen, I have some things here that I don't think that I like, even from you as a coach right now. And I think Hoiberg would have respected that. And it's just a situation that got a little bit uglier than it needed to be, and the Bulls are definitely struggling as a result.
Yeah, I'm not going to say you're in, I completely disagree with you. I'll agree with you maybe to some degree. But I'm going to say this because I feel like there's another part to this maybe. And I'm not saying that he's going to have to explain or justify this. There's no reason to explain or justify it. But let's really look at it for what it is. The last few seasons, this Chicago Bulls team has struggled with an identity of who is the actual voice for this basketball team. I really think that people resigned to the fact that it was more Tom Thibodeau because it couldn't be Derrick Rose. Derrick Rose was never vocal. A lot of what he said, how he spoke, his words were more of the actions that he had on the basketball court. And when a person who speaks more about, how he feels, the way he wants to play the game, how he feels about his teammates, when that is not present on the basketball court because of his injuries, then who steps up and speaks on behalf of the team? And in most cases, it was Tom Thibodeau. Okay. Now you look at a guy like Fred Hoiberg. Okay. Cool Freddie, I call him, because he's just really a laid back kind of guy. There's no rah-rah in this dude. I mean, at least with Tibbs, he had a little rah-rah to him. He had a little, angst in him. You can tell when he was frustrated with his players. You can tell when he was excited to see his players execute something or upset a team or take it to or even get to the Eastern Conference Finals. Look, there's a small sample size with Fred Hoiberg. But the reason why I said all of that was to say this. With Jimmy Butler, I think Jimmy Butler has sat and watched this manifest itself into the same question that's still going to be asked. Who is going to be the voice of the Chicago Bulls? Listen, you could have said Joakim Noah, but Joakim Noah is not even a starter. He may be in the center in the huddle, but then he relegates himself to the bench, behest of of Fred Hoiberg. So who is going to be the true voice for this basketball team? Now, doing it in front of the cameras, yeah, maybe I agree with you. But you know what? You're looking at a team over the last 4 or 5 years, Shaw, which we can safely say has fallen short of where they really need to be. And at some point, if the expectations, if the murmurings and the chirpings are, this is going to be Jimmy Butler's team. Hey, if Jimmy Butler has been suppressing his true self really at the request, or not even a request, really at the expense of, we've got a superstar here that everyone is looking to be taking us to the promised land, and he hasn't doing it, or he isn't capable of doing it, or he's mentally not there to do it. You know what? If I'm Jimmy Butler and I've been doing what I've been doing over the last year or so with my performance, I got to step up and say something because nobody else is.
It's tough. Like I said, it's a really tough situation. And I just feel like, because even Butler himself said it's something that he probably should have kept to himself, or, not necessarily kept to himself, but spoken to management with and spoken to Hoiberg about, behind closed doors. there's no doubt in anybody's mind that it's Jimmy Butler's team. Nobody's sitting here trying to pretend like Derrick Rose is still that guy, other than Derrick Rose himself. And I think you're 100% correct, where everyone knows that Chicago has underachieved in the last 3 or 4 seasons, given their talent, especially
But
last
Shaw,
year.
don't you think though, and let's not act like the elephant ain't in a room with this, okay? Don't you think that Derrick Rose maybe should be, I want to say endorsing what we already come to know, validating what we already come to know. I'm not saying that if Derrick Rose concedes to this, that we should all of a sudden be questioning Derrick Rose, oh, he's no longer got it. But let's be realistic. You're not doing what Jimmy Butler is doing for your basketball team. And you know what? The great players, they are not afraid to step aside, and Dwayne Wade did it for LeBron James, right? We've seen that. David Robinson did it for Tim Duncan. So why is it difficult for Derrick Rose to do it for Jimmy Butler when you know Derrick Rose right now is not that dude?
I mean, Rose doesn't believe it. I mean, that's all it boils down to. Anytime you hear Derrick Rose discuss his own playing ability, especially after he's had a good game, he's like, well, it's just a matter of me getting comfortable, getting my rhythm, coach is telling me to push, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, he's a broken record. He continues to portray that uber confidence that he's still a guy who can really be a leader and go-to guy on this team. And it's hard because I think he definitely needs Butler's help to do that. But he's not the same person. And, it is Jimmy Butler's team now. Obviously, he showed some flashes in the playoffs last year where he played very, very well in some stretches. But there's no question he is number 2. There's not even a 1B, 1A situation here. He's a number 2 guy and potentially even number 3 behind Paul Gasol.
That's what I was going to say, Shaw. I mean, I don't even think an argument has to be made. I really just think it is what it is. That's why you signed Paul Gasol. Look, I know that they said that the Chicago Bulls were signing Paul Gasol because they really think that he is what they need, because they were hoping for Derrick Rose to be that guy. But that was because they didn't see what they saw with Jimmy Butler. No one expected what Jimmy Butler brought to the table last season, right? And so we were thinking this might just be a one-hit wonder. He might be like the Gordon Hayward of the Eastern Conference, basically, with how he played. Right? We're not going to see this as a sustainable thing. And now all of a sudden we're pretty much sipping the Kool-Aid on this. Like, it's really real. So I haven't seen Paul Gasol's productivity diminish at any point from what last year, even the demands of what Tom Thibodeau asked of Paul Gasol. Paul Gasol stepped up and delivered. Fred Hoiberg doesn't have a choice because he doesn't know what Derrick Rose is going to show up on a night in, night out basis. So yeah, I see it as Jimmy Butler 1, Paul Gasol 2, and Derrick Rose, 2B maybe, but really more of a 3 because he's just not consistent being that 2.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's valid in this stage of the game, and they really do need to figure out some chemistry. There's a lot of things going on. Taj Gibson's name has been brought up 1,000 times in terms of whether he's going to have been traded. Joakim Noah's name is being brought up now in terms of him being moved. They're still trying to find minutes for Bobby Porter. Still trying to figure out if Mirotic is the real deal, or was he a one-season wonder, if you will, as well. They're still waiting for Mike Dunleavy to come back. They have a lot of issues on this roster and on this team in general, and they do need to figure it out, and they need to figure it out relatively quickly before their window completely closes on them.
Yeah, it's just amazing to me, Shaw, though, that not even a year ago, when they had Lil Nate on that basketball team, this team had the heart of Rocky Balboa, right? They had the mentality of Apollo, like Creed. You know what I mean? Like Adonis Creed, man. They wanted to knock somebody out so bad. They're stepping up saying, who's next? And just out of injuries alone, it's what's prevented us from being able to truly see the potential of what the Chicago Bulls team could really do. I don't know whether or not they'd have won an NBA championship, but I would have really liked to see this team come to fruition. And it's just like that in the blink of an eye. We're already talking about the makeup of this team is just not good enough for them to sustain their anything that they're choosing to try to accomplish this year is going to have any significant achievement, production, for not just the franchise, but even for the hopes of the fan base to believe that this is a Bulls team that's going to do things moving forward. So it's just really strange how all of these, these turn of events have taken place. All right, Shaw, let's go ahead and focus our attention on the second part of our segment of the drop, which is the NBA Hall of Fame. The names have been dropped. Some marquee names clearly have been inked out as inductees for the 2016 Hall of Fame, most notably our man, the answer, Allen Iverson, Shaquille O'Neal, Jason Kidd, Steve Nash, and an interesting name that's being thrown out there as a first ballot, Yao Ming. And Shaw, you were caught in the midst of a pretty interesting conversation, which is what allowed you to help bring this into the forefront, right? Listen, is Yao Ming deserving of being a Hall of Fame inductee?
The short answer right now is no. I just don't believe so. The long answer is that he's probably going to get in. I don't think he's going to get on the first ballot, though. The thing about it is what people need to understand. And even myself, when I look at it, because I think very singular-mindedly, if you will, I think of the Hall of Fame as the NBA Hall of Fame. It's not. It's the Basketball Hall of Fame. So it's college, it's international. It's anybody who's made a contribution to the game of basketball. Even Marv Albert is being inducted or has a chance to get into this right now and into this next class. So you need to really look at it in that holistic approach, if you will. And Yao Ming has done a lot for the European game. The Asia game over there in China. He is a multi Chinese Basketball Association champion and MVP, and he owns the Shanghai Sharks now. And he's brought the basketball culture to China on a grand scale. So for what he's done for the game of basketball, I think in the Asian continent, he's definitely going to get in. I just don't think from a first ballot standpoint, he deserves it. But that he's being grouped as one of the headline names on this class, which leads me to think he probably is going to get it on the first ballot. So that's my only issue is with the whole situation with Yao Ming.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with the thought process, Shaw, that Yao Ming, as a first ballot Hall of Fame, that's deserving, and I think it tarnishes a little bit of the credibility of other guys like Allen Iverson, Shaquille O'Neal. When you put Yao Ming's name up next to those guys as first ballots, Yao Ming would have had to have done something really, really significant. And the only thing that I can lean on outside of what he brings what he's brought to the table as an owner, as an ambassador, so to speak, is that Yao Ming came in at a time that's absolutely, opened up the door. I mean, kicked the doors down for Far East relations and cultural exchange for the NBA. With that being said, I will also say that if you really look at it for what it is, Yao Ming is one of the few players that will probably wind up being put in this class, and it's an elite class of people from an international standpoint. He came in at a time where international basketball players still had question marks, and they've had quite a few prior to that we're not talking about are ever going to make the Hall of Fame. He did not have a long career, clearly, but there was a window period where Yao Ming, really had some dominant play. I don't know if whether or not basketball analytics from a numbers perspective can save, the thought process of first ballot Hall of Fame. You know how baseball sometimes like to get those guys that are teetering on the edge and they use sabermetrics to kind of ink them in and stuff like that. I don't know if we're going to be able to do that with Yao Ming. But I will say that I'm not going to be disappointed that Yao Ming would make it simply because of the fact that he is one of the few international players to really be a virtual superstar. And he basically lived up to that aspect. He didn't bring championships or anything like that for the Houston Rockets, but he made the Houston market relevant again. He held his end of the bargain until they were able to get him some players to help him make some of the runs that they made, getting a Tracy McGrady and when they had Steve Francis and those guys. But I can honestly say, Shaw, that I do think that he's deserving of being in the Hall of Fame. I agree with you, though. I don't think he's deserving to be a first ballot Hall of Fame.
Yeah, and I think that's where we're going to get it. I think he's probably going to get in just because of what he's done and his relationship with the NBA and even just his relationship with reporters and things like that. And he had a very successful NBA career, averaging 19 points and 9 rebounds a game for the time that he was in the league. And I think he was an all-star every single year, obviously because of the China vote. But nevertheless, what he's done overall and what he continues to do, I think is what's going to get him in on the first ballot, even though I think statistically it's probably a little short simply because he didn't play long enough, and yeah, nobody wants to get hurt and that's not his fault. per se. It's just something that I think, they're going to kind of overlook in this situation because he's such a nice guy and is such an ambassador for the game, as you mentioned a little bit earlier.
Yeah, definitely. The years 2005 to 2008, Yao Ming was among one of the best. And, even though some of those, even within some of those years, some of them were kind of shortened due to those injuries and stuff, Yao Ming was just really just a dominant force. And, it's great to see that he is being mentioned among, the great players of the game and stuff like that, maybe a little too soon. But nevertheless, I'm more so looking forward to the names that do get mentioned as Hall of Fame inductees as well. Guys like Allen Iverson, guys like Shaquille O'Neal, really cementing and really quashing some of the argument and talk, about who these guys were. Even if it's selfish enough, the numbers and the play that they've put on, the memories and the highlights that these guys were able to amass, I just think that this just makes this 2016 a very formidable class, and it's going to be great to see moving forward. The conversations and the discussions, who gets in, who may have to wait, but I really like the list of guys that they're going to have to choose from. I think it's going to be tough pickings.
Yeah, and let's little sexist here, guys and girls here. So don't forget Cheryl Swoops is definitely going to get in here. She's one of the key names and getting on her first ballot as well. And again, like as I mentioned, Marv Albert, I think he's going to get in first ballot just because, he's been the voice of the NBA for such a long time. So I think it's going to be really interesting. We'll get more and more clarity on this during the NBA All-Star weekend, as they always do. And then we'll see the induction start a little bit down in the summertime.
Yeah, man, it's going to be good stuff. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And this was The Drop. Coast to coast. Time now to go coast to coast, discussing the news in the association. You ready to rock and roll, Mr. Shaw?
Absolutely, man. That's right.
All right. Uncle Drew has returned. All right, well, his better half has probably returned as well, too. Kyrie Irving set to make his debut with the Cleveland Cavaliers. Not a moment too soon, especially with that Christmas game rolling up, sir.
Absolutely, man. Kyrie is, looked pretty good in his first game from what I saw, and the Cavaliers have all their hopes rest on him and the health of this Cleveland Cavaliers roster, if you will. So great to see Kyrie back, Uncle Drew doing his thing.
Yeah, man. Out in Memphis, interesting change is taking place, and I discussed this with our man Joe Mullinax on his podcast, GBB Live, man. Z-Bo on the bench, it relegated to the bench and loving it. Are we really buying that out there in the grindhouse?
Well, I don't know if Z-Bo is loving it, but I definitely feel like this is a sign of the times. And, I was on vacation when he did that show, but I think this is something that we talked to Joe a little bit about, was the NBA times passing Memphis by. And apparently Yeager feels like the Grizzlies need to play smaller, need to play faster. Matt Barnes is out there, and he's not a great shooter, but he does stretch the floor a little bit. And Z-Bo now getting a chance to feast on some of the second units out there. His minutes are down, though, so I'm a little concerned about that. But nevertheless, this is definitely a sign of the changing times in the NBA.
I'm just concerned altogether, man. I mean, we talk about grit and grind, and Z-Bo and Marc Gasol were that, and they embody that, and we're just not seeing that any longer. And listen, I'm not going to be surprised if Chris Wallace and those guys start making wholesale changes, but that might actually change the dynamic at the end of a I don't want to use the word era because it hasn't been that long, but the success of this basketball team was predicated on what Zach Randolph was able to help do for this team some years ago, and right now that change is clearly now showing that they're trying to move into a different direction. It could be without our boy Zach Randolph. Out in I want to use that. Where are we talking? Detroit. Out in Detroit basketball. The return of Brandon Jennings. Is this really all good, man, considering the fact that this Pistons team has been overachieving the first quarter of the season?
Well, we'll definitely see. Again, I've been one of those beating that drum that I don't think he's going to play the good soldier. And there already are some rumors coming out that his name might be in trade rumors out there. Span Gundy is not eager to play him immediately. He had a successful stint in the D-League, and Van Gundy said immediately, all right, well, he doesn't need to be down there, but he's not going to play ahead of guys like Steve Blake. So that says a lot to me about where Brandon Jennings stands right now. Hopefully he can get himself back and get into that rotation, but you're definitely going to see his name in trade rumors in the next coming weeks.
Speaking of trade rumors, the Boston Celtics apparently have been slapping David Lee on the trade block. What's the deal, man? Prime cut? Or does he still stay with the Boston Celtics to help him continue this successful season thus far?
Well, I think Ainge recognizes that, he's not what they wanted him to be in that situation, although he's playing good soldier as he did in Golden State as well. I just don't think it's ideal for him, and he wants to be able to play for a contract. So he's not going to get a big deal, playing 16 minutes a night, if you will, whatever it is. He needs some more playing time, and I think Ainge are going to try to see if they can get some assets for him of some sort, whether that's a pick or whether that's players in the future, we'll see. But you're going to see Lee's name out there quite a bit. Don't know if he'll actually get moved, but it's definitely something you have to watch in Boston.
I like David Lee Shaw. Just real quick, is there a team in mind that you think David would probably be most productive for?
That's a real tough question, because I think he wants to go to a situation where he still has a chance to win. There's lots of teams he could go to and potentially produce and get minutes and get his points and rebounds and those things like that. But trying to think of a situation right off the bat where he's going to go and immediately make that team competitive and make them a contender.
Toronto Raptors, maybe?
They do need a power forward. Butler's been running around there like the right thing to do, along with Patrick Patterson. So that's potentially a suitor as well. Other teams that need power forwards are, Portland, but they're not really in the running right now of anything. So I don't know. It's a situation that team has to have, because no matter what, Ainge's not going to just give it away.
Yeah, definitely. Out in Houston, we talked about this a little bit earlier. Dwight Howard kind of making his presence making his voice heard, that he's a little bit unhappy with his role. Haven't we not heard this story before from Dwight?
Yeah, it's a little tiresome.
I mean, he's gone from Superman to Bizarro right now, bro.
But he's trying to refute it. He's saying, not everything you hear, and he hasn't come out and said it himself. It has been media reports that have said that he's unhappy with his role. But there must be something to it, because again, as we said earlier, talking about the Christmas Day games, Bickerstaff came out and said that we do need to get him more involved, to get him more touches. And there are nights where it has been a long-standing thing where Howard gets 6-7 shots. I just don't understand by his stature and his physical capability how that's ever the case for him, ever. I just don't understand that. So, but he cannot get the ball to himself, so I think that a lot has to do with the offense that's being run. But he's had this problem for a little while too, so maybe he's not being aggressive enough offense.
Yeah, really interesting. I don't know. I guess to me, it's just another byproduct of a person who just still has not figured it out, and I don't think he ever will, man. And whether that constitutes, him being an important piece to helping a team win a championship, he's no longer the primary piece to help a team win a championship. But we've talked about that before, man, and I know we're going to wind up revisiting that conversation again at some point down the road. Out in Boston, Shaw. Well, not Boston. Out in Minnesota. Interesting dilemma. Interesting situation. Kevin Garnett was benched on the back of the second of a back-to-back game by Coach Sam Mitchell. I wanted to bring this up as more of a drop topic, but I think it's a great topic still even to bring up for Coast to Coast. Are you buying the fact that Sam Mitchell is benching KG on that second of a back-to-back because of the fact that he played the first game of that back-to-back, when obviously this could be Kevin Garnett's last outing or last appearance in the TD Garden?
Well, I mean, the KG thing and Boston thing, it's a little awkward that he didn't didn't play in there, but you're definitely going to see KG's minutes start to trend downwards, and they already have. As they have other guys they need to play, and Gorgie Jang and Carl Anthony Towns have been a successful lineup for the last maybe 10 games or so. So he definitely needs to find Jang those minutes. Mohamed plays a little bit of stretch four at sometimes as well. And I heard a rumor that Pekovic is on his way coming back as well. It's a name we haven't talked about at all this season. So Garnett's role really is to be kind of a mentor to these guys and really help them throughout their development, not necessarily to play the minutes. I think the thing in Boston, he probably should have played. That was maybe a snafu on Mitchell's part there, but you're definitely going to see Garnett's minutes trend downward for the rest of the season.
Yeah, listen, I like how you tried to be all nice with him when you call it snafu, right? Like I call it noon o'clock, all right? Like I'm not, listen, this is exactly the reason why Sam Mitchell does not have a long tenure as a head coach. And I'm not saying that to knock his acumen as a basketball coach and not the fact that he can probably become a great strategist. I just don't think sometimes he sees the big picture, and I think he sometimes takes himself out of that. To me, this would have been a class move, given the circumstances and the situation this Minnesota Timberwolves team has had to endure losing their head coach, Flip Saunders. To me, I just think you have to look at the bigger picture. Kevin Garnett has always been about the Boston Celtics has always been about what he gave to that city, what he gave to the fans, even though his whole career started as a Minnesota Timberwolf. And just to me, I just felt like he missed the boat on this one. You put the man out there on the court when the fans are asking for it, because what do you have to lose at this particular point? I get it. You're trying to get these young guys to, to play, to learn. But I think at the same time, too, this may be the last time Kevin Garnett sets foot in that TD Garden. And I just think as a coach, you recognize that sometimes it's more than just about the play. It's about the game and what some players have done for the game. And I just think it would have been a nice gesture. Again, I just think Sam Mitchell missed the boat on that one. Finally, Shaw, out in Portland, bad news. Our man, you know what I'm saying? The mighty man, Damian Lillard, Dame Dash. I call him Dame Dash. He's not going to be dashing, too much, for a while. Plantar fasciitis, and we know how this injury affects other basketball players, man. I mean, how does this set back a premier point guard like Damian Lillard?
Well, the only thing that heals is his rest. That's the thing you always see when this injury is mentioned. So we'll see how long he's out. It could be 1 or 2 games. It could be, maybe a week or 2. We'll see. But Portland Trail Blazers, they've had an interesting start to the season. They've been competitive at times, but they definitely can't do anything without Lillard. And I heard McCollum's a little bit banged up too with an ankle as well. So they can't have those two guys out, but least of all Lillard. So hopefully he's back as soon as possible, and this plantar fasciitis doesn't keep him down for too long.
Yeah, look, we've seen it happen to Joakim Noah, even though he plays at the center position. The ability to plant, to explode. All of these things are important for Damian Lillard. I mean, the position at the point guard position, because of the extended minutes that he has to play, plus he's the best basketball player on that team. I agree with you. He's going to need rest, but I fear that there's really no time frame that you can actually depict as enough time for someone like Damian Lillard, because he's not going to want to sit out for too long, which may actually, shorten or even further put more damage to the situation for him to heal from this injury. It just worries me, because for bigs, you can probably afford to do that. But with a premier point guard, with the gameplay of someone like a Dame Dash for this Portland Trailblazers team, I fear that they may actually put more harm to him. And we've seen this happen with superstar basketball players like Kevin Durant, where they're so eager to come back, they don't give themselves the proper amount of rest. And in the end, they wind up creating further injuries, or even exacerbating the injury that they just came off of, which is going to put them out for an extended period of time. And we definitely don't want that. And certainly the fans in Portland don't want that either. Awesome stuff as we ran through all of the news happening in the association. My man Shaw on it like white on rice, boy. I'm loving it. Great stuff, man, this week, man. And we covered a ton of different topics, man. There's so much good stuff that is emanating right now from, over the last week or so, not just for what we're expecting to see come Christmas, but Shaw, when the New Year's hits, we're going to be looking at, the situation with a lot of these teams, where teams are situated in the conferences and stuff like that. And I really think that we're going to really start looking at teams and saying, okay, which ones are going to have to start making a move? Do they need to improve their roster, or really do they need to start selling off some pieces and start retooling or rebuilding for the future?
Yeah, it's a great time of year, especially when the new year comes around, because as you said, is really when trade season really begins at its peak, if you will, a few weeks before All-Star, and then the deadline is right after that. So we're definitely going to see some teams starting to stir the pot a little bit. And I thought we saw a little bit of that last year, where teams made moves earlier before the trade deadline, because they wanted to have that time to build a chemistry with their new acquisitions, if you will. So I expect a lot of that, this year as well. If we see anything happening, it might happen, later part of December here and early parts of January, as you're alluding to begin the year. So it should be a great time for NBA fans, man. And before we sign off, as always, man, we wish everybody a happy holidays, to you and yours. Merry Christmas, all of that. And we'll definitely catch up with you next week.
Oh, yeah, man. Definitely. I mean, we want everyone to have themselves a Merry Christmas. Definitely take in the time of the year to bring joy and peace to our fellow man, and great basketball to be played. More importantly, too, we just want everyone to, be in the spirit. It's not often that we all have an opportunity to share quality time with loved ones, and even whether they're near or far, just being in the presence of the moment is really what it's all about. So we want to make sure that all of our listeners and, people who are just avid fans of the game in any sport, take the time, sharing a laugh, sharing a game, just really taking in. It's a great time of the year, and so much good stuff can happen in the holiday season. So for the baseline, Cali, Warren Shaw, listen, don't forget, we will be on and popping before the New Year's turns in. We got one more to give you. That's going to be our gift to you. But in the meantime, you go ahead and digest this and replay it if you like to. We appreciate everybody. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and we'll catch up with you soon on the baseline.